Righty. What's everybody doing today? Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Steve here from The Buried Life. As you can see over here, YouTube channel, it's kind of a mishmash of stuff. But basically, in regards to retiring in Korea or retiring overseas, a little background on that. We ended up, the wife and I, we sold everything in the United States. The house, the car, the truck, the guns, the ammo, the prepping, I miss my guns. But with that, we sold everything, even everything in the kitchen junk drawer. And we threw stuff in a couple of suitcases, and then we took some time off and spent some time in Hawaii with our daughter, which was really nice. And then we came to Korea and retired. Yeah, it's kind of not the norm, but it is becoming the norm for a lot of people my age. I'm 57, and actually I retired a little bit earlier than most, but because we went overseas, we were able to retire earlier because the dollar goes much further here. So that's kind of a bonus. With that being said, people have asked me questions on, what are some of the big differences besides a different language, different foods, different lifestyles, different electrical codes and building layouts and architecture and things like that. Housing situations where everything in Korea, the majority of people live in apartments versus, what we see in the States, which is usually houses. It's very different in many regards. And some of those things are traffic tickets. So in the United States, you can be driving along and you're just cruising and you're kicking it, and you're going 10 or 20 over the speed limit, whatever it is, 30, 40 maybe. And usually what happens in the United States is that there will be some police officer or statey that's there, patrol officer, who kind of like, what is that, Fridays with Frank, the guy that, in Pinal County Sheriff's Department, I think he ended up actually being retired now, but he would do videos of himself doing traffic stops of people who, were speeding or doing whatever it is that they broke the law and got pulled over for doing. So how is that here in Korea? There are very few policemen that do that type of job. I'm not saying that they aren't there, but from my driving around in Korea for the last year, it is very rare to see Korean police officers with a speed gun sitting on the side of a road, waiting to get that guy who's bustling along. It's just not something that we see a lot. Matter of fact, I have never seen it yet. I have seen officers, I have seen police cars driving the roads and things like that. But as far as traffic tickets, what's interesting about Korea is that there are so many cameras everywhere. There are a ton of cameras everywhere. I mean, a ton of cameras everywhere. If you can pull up, I'll see if I can, let me see if I can pull this up. Camera map. Let me see if I can find this. So, yeah. Excuse me. So it ends up that in Korea there are a ton of cameras. And yeah, it is amazing on how many cameras there are and what you can see, and it's just like on intersections and changes. Let me see if I can find that. That's not it. Well, anyway. It's really interesting because what you can end up seeing is that there's a lot of CCTV cameras in Korea. There's a lot of electronic speed traps. So in other words, you have a camera, you have the radar that is mounted up on, it could be light poles or intersections or things like that, sections of the freeway. And what's really interesting is that the navigation systems that you have in your car, kind of like Google Maps or whatever navigation you have, in Korea, they have similar things, with the exception that they will show you on the map as you're driving of speed enforcement area upcoming, or whatever it translates to. And what's really interesting is that it will tell you, like, 500 meters is a speed enforcement area or speed enforcement camera, and it'll show it on the map of your navigation system, and it'll say, speed limit is 50 kilometers per hour and blah blah blah, whatever it is. And an audible voice comes over and tells you this, and then there's an audible alarm telling you about the reduction in speed, or the speed camera, or even speed bumps. Now, I don't know if some of you watch some of my videos, but it's interesting because I can go from our apartment, and when I drive, and as we're going to the gym, we're going to do that today, as soon as we turn onto the main street, the navigation system will say, warning, speed bump ahead, and boom, there's a speed bump. So it will know, Korean navigation knows where the speed bumps are, because they're put in there, and then it's disseminated to the navigation systems. So what does this mean in regards to traffic tickets? Well, you'll have the radar systems in the camera, and when your speed goes above the speed limit, and then it will take a picture of you, your car, your license plate, you, hopefully you're not there in the car with somebody doing something X-rated while you were in the car, even though that has happened a few times. That's kind of funny. We've seen that in the United States. But gone are the days of where law enforcement actually sets up speed traps, and they're sitting on the side of the road, and they've got their speed gun, and they're checking people, and I just haven't seen that. Matter of fact, to think back, I have never seen that in Korea. And I've got a lot of years in Korea. We're working on, 12, this will be 13. So we're working on 14 years of being in Korea. Now, a lot of those years I was in the military, but a lot of those years I was living off post. And many of those years I had a car or I had a motorcycle, and we would travel. And, even when we took public transportation of buses and taxis and things like that, it's just very rare to see police. So it's like, well, how do they stop the bad people? And it's like, well, it's quite simple. They have these speed enforcement cameras that'll take a picture, boom, and then off of your license plate, they will send you the bill. And boom, there it is. It's, there's no altercation of the mean cop or the bad cop or the good cop, or with the bad person, or the bad person with the good, whatever it is, or the good person with the good cop, whatever it is. For whatever traffic infraction there is in regards to speeding, you just don't see that here. It's just not a thing. And so, and with the mentality of the people in Korea is to follow the rules, for the betterment of everybody. I guess I can say that's kind of a thing. Is that not a lot of people speed, but not a lot of people speed to the point of where it's reckless or endangering. A lot of people, you'll see people speeding, but when you see and hear on your navigation system, what's interesting is you'll get the warning, it'll flash and tell you, speed enforcement up ahead, or speed camera ahead. Everybody slows down to the speed that they're supposed to be going, and then of course afterwards they'll pick it up. But what Korea has done is put these cameras and these notifications on the navigation systems in areas that had a lot of accidents. So it's just kind of amazing, because then people slow down, and then there's not as many accidents, and then we don't have these back and forth altercations between law enforcement and people, although there still are some every once in a while, but it's very rare compared to the United States. So what about regular traffic tickets? What about parking tickets? This is kind of interesting, because in Korea, it's kind of known that you can park anywhere you want. You could be in the opposing lane of traffic, facing the other way, but as long as you got your four-way flashers on, it's deemed, he's got his flashers on. Oh, it's okay. It as absurd as that seems, That's kind of what goes on. So you will see cars that will pull off onto the side of the road. They will stop at the corners of intersections where a car shouldn't be parked. They will park in walkways, in crossing areas. But as long as you got your four-way flashers, it's kind of like, you shouldn't have parked there, but you got your four-way flashers. So it's a temporary, it's a weird thing. It's really a weird thing. But the thing that I have seen in regard to traffic and parking infractions are vehicles that have cameras on the top that just kind of cruise through areas. And what these cameras do is take pictures of the license plates. And if people are parked in areas that they're not supposed to be parked, the traffic enforcement, they don't stop, they don't write a ticket, they don't get engage the person and get into a battle of wills and this and that. They just drive on, and the camera system on top of the car takes the picture of the license plate, boom, shows that it's an infraction, and a fine is sent to the registered user's address. And that's it. That's all it is. So the person will have to pay that fine and so on and so forth. It's very non-intrusive. It removes the variable of the officer and the person who is engaged in the infraction in case somebody's having a bad day or whatever it is. So it minimizes the escalation, which we see so prevalently in the United States. But I should say, with a disclaimer, in the United States, the majority of people follow the law as well. So, it's not really that different, but I think because the United States is much larger, 350 or 60 million people, whatever it is now, versus 50 some odd million of the people in Korea, you'll see more infractions in the United States just because of the larger pool of people. But how they deal with the parking tickets and the speeding tickets and so on and so forth is way more advanced than what we see in the United States. In the United States, it's like, we have the traffic and the speed cameras, and unfortunately, in a lot of places, they use those speed cameras as a revenue-generating device to bring money into a county, a town, or whatever it is. And unfortunately, it is based not upon the objective of keeping people safe, but we're going to do this, and we're going to put these cameras into areas that we know for the sole purpose of generating revenue for our county, department, borough, whatever it is. And I find that's kind of disingenuous. Oh yeah, by the way, we want to cut down on we're concerned about the safety of people. But really, when you get down to it, it's an income generating type of thing. Now, could that be the same for Korea? It could be, but if that was the case, then why on the navigation systems in your vehicles, why does it warn you about the speed enforcement areas so that you can slow down and go the speed limit in those areas? Interesting. School zones, the same thing. If you're coming up on a school zone, your Korean navigation system will pop up and say, speed enforcement, school zone ahead, 30 kilometers, blah, blah, blah. And, or 20 kilometers or whatever the speed limit is in those school zone areas. So you could say that on one hand, Korea is trying to generate some easy money by doing the speed camera radar thing. But if that was the case, why would they warn people about these areas on the navigation before you get to that area? I think that's something that the United States should do. And I think it would be very beneficial to the United States because you have a lot of people that, there are dangerous areas. There's places where people speed where they shouldn't be speeding because it causes accidents and, loss of life and money and so on and so forth, which the safety of the populace is important. So I think it would be a huge benefit if in the United States they actually had warnings on the GPS to let you know of the decrease of speed or that there is a speed zone ahead or so on and so forth. And I just think it's an awesome system. And the way that they deal with it, the parking tickets and so on and so forth, the vehicle just drives through, there's not two people bumping heads, and it's just very, very different. What about police encounters? again, we have this difference between the United States and Korea. The United States is a huge country. We have a ton of law enforcement officers. When I was doing a study, I worked in law enforcement when I did a paper as part of some training and some homework. It ends up that I think there was like some 800,000 people had arrest powers in the United States or whatever it was. And the minority of those get into problems. They get into trouble. In other words, we have bad cops, bad LEOs. Yes, we do. Every country has bad LEOs. And we really don't have a lot of bad LEOs in the United States when you look at the statistics and you look at the reports. It's just that the social media and the media pumps so much time and energy into the bad cops that it makes it look like there's a ton of bad cops when there actually isn't. There's actually a small percentage of bad cops. In Korea, what I've noticed in all my years of being in Korea, as a military service member who lived overseas, who lived on military bases, who lived off base while in the military, and then as a retired civilian, I've seen Korean police and encounters from a very different perspectives. One, I was in a military police unit. I actually went out into the Ville and did patrols in the GI bars and so on and so forth. So that was really fun and interesting. And the Korean police, as a whole, I can honestly tell you that I've never seen a Korean policeman go off the handle. I've never seen a Korean policeman have an agenda. I've never seen a Korean policeman cuss and swear at somebody, even though the situation in my mind would have warranted such. The professionalism that I've seen with Korean police in my experiences has been something to look up to. It's like, my gosh, I mean, as we were doing Ville patrol in GI bars, and, what are the odds? GIs in a foreign country, in a bar, and fights break out, with local nationals. What are the odds of that happening? Military police show up. I've seen military police, the majority of them have really good professionalism. There's a few bad apples that I've seen during my time, but in all the engagements with Korean police, I never saw a lack of professionalism. I never saw anybody resort to cursing or swearing. And I think as Korean people as a whole, they're stern, they're firm, fair, and effective, but they don't fly off the handle. They don't lose their professionalism in what I've seen. Now, has it happened? Probably. But in my experience, I've never seen that happen with a Korean police officer. And I think part of that stems from the fact that Koreans as a whole, as a homogenous society of all Koreans, they're more concerned about the group following the rules and having respect for elders and having respect for police officers, having respect for, the things we used to respect in the United States, but we don't so much more in the United States. So I think that has a lot to do with it. So when a police officer says, hey, do this, stop doing that, even when somebody who's drunk or inebriated or crazy, they carry themselves with a high level of professionalism because that is what is expected of them. That is what is required of them. You don't see Korean police officers cussing and swearing at people like we do in the United States that we see on media and social media. So it's really different. I think it's a cultural thing that comes into play. It's a respect thing. It's an authority thing. And Korea is very steeped in showing respect to people that are older, people that have titles or degrees or positions of authority, and those that don't have that, they give respect and they're polite and professional and so on and so forth. But it's also reciprocated back. So it's a really interesting dynamic when compared to the United States. For example, we see a lot of videos where teenagers and kids in the United States and how they react to law enforcement. Even if the law enforcement officer is doing their job and they are professional, they're not cussing and swearing, you'll see kids in the United States, teenagers, even younger kids, cussing and swearing at cops, calling them names, the whole nine yards. What are you going to do to me, pig, and blah, blah, blah. for no provocation other than an officer walking the beat or going through and asking questions about a situation or whatever. It just amazes me on how far we have lost our professionalism and our respect in the United States. But yeah, it's definitely different. Now, there are a lot of places in the United States, I'd say the majority of them, of people who respect law enforcement. The majority of law enforcement respect the people that they're to protect and serve, and they don't resort to cussing and swearing and getting bent out of shape because, some drunk guy who got in a fight is now trying to fight the police and they take it personal. I think there's a lot to be learned. When you think you're all that in a bag of chips, when you go to other countries and you go to other places and you see how other people act or react and their level of professionalism, you think, wow, yeah, maybe we need to work on that part. So, yeah, there's a lot of different things in the United States. For example, I get to see Korean police a lot. Now, you might be saying, well, wait a second. First, you said you didn't see them a lot. Well, I don't see them on the roads and the highways and things like that. See them in passing, but not in the United States like we do, which is kind of all over, But I do see Korean police because I'm not stationed, but I live near a military base, and they have like mini police stations and observation places to, protect the public and, keep, because things happen, with GIs and bars and people and alcohol, you get all those things involved and things happen. But there's a lot of Korean police that are stationed and, they do their shifts, they're professional, their uniforms are strapped. It means they're well dressed and professional looking. And I've never seen a Korean police officer in our area walking around who had a look of disdain or disrespect for the people that they are kind of doing in their job in this area. That's different than what we see in the United States. In my experience, there's been places that I've lived in where police will look at you and they will mean mug you for no reason. In other words, you have that person that's got that little big man syndrome, little man who, obviously got picked on as a kid and then he became a cop in some small town. And so now he's got an attitude. Now he has authority and he's going to make sure that everybody, knows it. I've seen those too in the United States because I've lived in some small towns and in Colorado and Arizona and things like that. And there are some bad apples. Compared to what I've experienced in Korea, I don't see that. I haven't seen that. I'm not saying that it's not there, but I haven't seen that. And I spent a lot of years in Korea. I spent a lot of time, like I said, I did Ville Patrol in, the GI towns that are close to military bases here in Korea when I was stationed. And with the Korean law enforcement, I just don't see that. So it is really different here in Korea. But the differences come because of the societal norms that are held by the people here in Korea. And it's a little bit different. There's more respect. The other thing we don't have here in Korea is we don't have a lot of guns. So, there's strict gun control here in Korea. And versus the United States, which is the Second Amendment, which I love it. I love guns and ammo. I love shooting stuff. I love teaching self-defense and concealed carry. I was a concealed carry instructor. I also did firearms instruction. I was a contractor. I was contracted by the U.S. military to teach military police on firearms tactics, weapons manipulation, shoot, move, communicate, dynamic stuff on the range and courses of fire. Why you put gear in certain places so it's easy to access, a standardization of uniform and equipment. So if you come across a downed fellow local law enforcement officer, if your magazines and your safety equipment, your first aid kit are all in the same place as everybody else's, then in times of extreme trouble, boom, you can go immediately to that place and get ammunition or get that first aid kit or whatever it is. So there needs to be some standardization, which is sorely needed. And just kind of seems that, that's not a thing in a lot of departments in the United States. But I digress. Yeah, it's just really, really different here. And that's another thing that's different in being retired here in Korea is law enforcement, how they carry themselves. And yeah, do they have firearms? Yes, they do, but that is like the last resort. And so they will go for less lethal means, usually to get for things to escalate to the point of where a law enforcement officer needs to draw a firearm. They're actually, I've seen reports or articles that talk about, don't shoot to kill, shoot to wound, and stop the person, which in the United States is kind of different in our levels of force because if somebody comes at you and you're in fear for your life or severe bodily injury or death, you are allowed by law to defend yourself with lethal force, from lethal force. So, shooting, if somebody comes at you with a knife, oh yeah, a knife can do a ton of damage. And if somebody's coming at me with a knife, I will not hesitate to, empty a magazine into a person to stop that person from slicing me up. I mean, the damage that a knife can do is incredible. But here in Korea, we don't really see that. We don't really see the extreme type of events and crimes that we do in the United States. We do see them in Korea, but it's just not that much and not at the scale as it is in the United States. Korea is generally considered an extremely safe nation. There are areas that I probably shouldn't have been in Korea as a military service member, as a young, dumb military service member who, I don't know, maybe drank too much on a few occasions, but never have I felt unsafe. That's kind of a strange thing to say. I've been in seedy areas. I have been in areas where there's obvious gang activity, but I've never felt unsafe. Maybe it's because I'm stupid. Maybe I'm just ignorant to the fact. But I also have to recognize that there's not like gangs of roving people going around looting stores, flash mobs going through stores and stealing tons of stuff. Like we see in the big cities of, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Detroit, New York, so on and so forth, where, tens and hundreds of people go into a store and just ransack and riot. I have been in riots. That's another thing. I've been in riots here in Korea. Now, that was way back in the day, and it was really interesting because I'm an American, and I ended up getting a part-time job, kind of off of my military time, of teaching English at a university up north, not in North Korea, but in north part of South Korea at a university. So I was getting paid because I was an American and they liked me, and it was a thing. It wasn't like an official, this is English literature and language. No, this was conversational English that I was teaching. So it was really cool. I enjoyed it. But one day as I finished the class and I was coming back, there was a riot. And there was I want to say there was over 5,000 people that were involved in this riot. And so we're walking down the street and all of a sudden I'm noticing the hair goes up on the back of my neck. I'm like, something's not right. My spidey senses are tingling and it is driving me insane. Well, it ends up that there was going to be a riot. And all of these people, all of these college students and people were filling the streets, and it filled up. You could not, there was no personal space, and we're all going in the same direction, and they're chanting and yelling, and there's flags, and I'm like, okay, this isn't good because I'm like the only round-eyed person here, and this doesn't sound good. And they're marching into the direction of the military base. Long story short, it ends up there were several Korean people that were pulling me aside, and I didn't understand it at first. And it's like, no, and they're pulling me aside. And it ends up that the Korean police had showed up in their riot control, and they had ended up deploying CS gas or tear gas and to disperse the crowds and so on and so forth. Because things were getting heated, bottles were being thrown, and so boom. Apparently that was the kicker. You've seen demonstrations, or at least I have seen demonstrations in Korea, where thousands and thousands of people show up. They chant, they yell, they sing, they have their flags, and they address their grievances by the right to protest. And that's allowed as long as you don't do something stupid like throw bottles and Molotov cocktails and things like that. Once you cross that line, yeah, they're not going to take any crap. And apparently that is what happened. But when that started, the Korean college students and the Korean people there that I was with in that crowd were pulling me aside, trying to get me into a building to get me away from all of that, which I found very, even that I knew, and I found out afterwards, that the riot was against the U.S. military. But I found it interesting that nobody tried to hit me or punch me. And like I said, there was thousands of people, and I'm walking down the middle of the street, and eventually I'm getting to the side because people are pulling me through. And then there was Korean college students that saw that and look at me, and then a couple are talking. Next thing you know, it's like the guy that was chanting and yelling, U.S. go home or whatever it was, stops and starts to move people out of the way to get me to the side of the street so I could get into a building. And in other words, I'm thinking, okay, it's I'm severely outnumbered, but I'm going to go out swinging. And I'm glad I didn't do anything preemptively. But just to see and experience that was very, I don't know, it just kind of opened my eyes as to you can be disagreeing with something, but you can still have respect for people. So I thought that was very refreshing. And I was really relieved at that point too, because I would have got my ass kicked. So yeah, being retired in Korea has a lot of different things going on. Now, are there still riots now? Yes, but not as many as there were before. Are there police atrocities in Korea? Yeah, but nowhere near the level that we see in the United States. Most people, you'll still see, I think one of the biggest problems I've seen in Korea is drunk driving. That seems to be during all my years, it's getting better. And I'll explain why it's getting better. But drunk driving was a huge thing in Korea. You drink, you party, you go from one bar to the next, and you drive to the next one, you drive to the next one. Next thing you know, there's a DUI, an accident, somebody's killed, and so on and so forth. Really horrendous things. In the United States, we see that as well. Korea has now, or has been, really focusing on that aspect of saying, hey, drunk driving, it's not good, it's bad, you get lots of troubles, kind of similar to what we do in the United States. The United States, you do the drunk driving thing, we see the commercials, it'll cost you $10,000 or $20,000 and you'll lose your license for so many years. You have to do so many hours of community service, you have to get a lawyer, you have to pay tons of money, and you have to do this and that. So all of these reasons as why not to drink and drive. We see that here in Korea as well. But now Korea actually has services to where, let's say you go out after work and you party and you drink too much, and instead of getting in your car and driving home or getting in your car and driving to the next bar that everybody's going to go to, they have a service, and it's on an app, where it's kind of like Uber, but somebody comes, picks you up, drives your car, can either drive you home and parks your car for you, and of course there's a fee to do that, or drives you to the next bar or place that you want to go, and then parks your car, and they can leave and you pay some money. Basically, it's like having a chauffeur so that you don't drive drunk. I think that is just amazing. And so the amount of drunk driving and DUIs has gone down remarkably because people are starting to see that, drunk driving is really a bad thing and it can ruin a lot of lives. So I have actually experienced this where we went out and somebody was driving and we had, we ate and we drank a lot. Boy, did we drink a lot. But then that person who was driving got on their phone, boom, and they said, hey, we're going to this place. And I'm thinking, I don't want him to drive. I don't want to go because if it takes driving, he is pretty drunk. Well, that's when I found out he had got on the app and got a guy to come and We wait out beside his car. This guy shows up, and it's, oh, yeah, 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 nice to meet you, and so on and so forth. And the guy gets in the car, sets everything up. We get in the back. He drives us to the next bar, or little eat house, drink place, and yeah, then takes us home. And another guy took us home or whatever. Yeah, it was like, wow, no judgment, no shame. It was a service that was provided. The guy who was doing it was so professional. And then, of course, everybody in our group was real polite to him as well, even though we were a little inebriated, to say the least. There was still respect, and nobody got stupid. So, yeah, there's different things that happen that Korea does that I think would benefit the United States. And, yeah, it's just really neat. So being retired over here, it is good, and it's different from the United States, but different can be good. But the amount of cameras that they have in Korea, I'll tell you what, it is. Let me see if I can find. Here, yeah, here they actually have an app that will show, like this one here. Let me see if I can make myself a little bit smaller here so you can see what's going on. So you can they have apps like this, Korean CCTV map, and it will have like major cameras at intersections and stuff like that. But when you get down to city areas, that's a lot of cameras. And it is pretty amazing on, it'll give you the camera feeds, but the maps and how many CCTV cameras there are in Korea will just amaze you. You cannot go anywhere without being seen on a camera. And that's the other thing I like about Korea, is that it's kind of a deterrent for crime. And I say that with my experience of working in prisons, and you have security cameras everywhere. And then the inmates know where the cameras are. They're not going to do their crimes, or I should say the majority of them are not going to do their crimes in front of the security cameras. Some do. You still have some idiots. But with Korea, I mean, that's just a very small area. And if you zoom in, there's even more. That doesn't even count the individual and the business cameras that businesses have. These are just traffic cameras and CCTV. So basically, again, because of the respect for people as a whole, and that we do the right thing as a people, as a society, we have less crime here in Korea than we do in the United States. And it is generally a safer country. With all of these cameras, if somebody does commit a crime, it is easier to find that person, that perpetrator, to find the victim and what actually happened, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, but, and we're concerned about, they put up a traffic camera and, in the center of town, and everybody's up in arms, and it's like, because they put in 2 or 3 cameras. You all don't know what, I mean, look at this, cameras. That is a bunch of cameras, and it's like that almost everywhere. And they keep increasing the cameras. They keep, increasing the resolution and new technologies, scanning for your vehicle and so on and so forth. We already talked about speed cameras and traffic cameras. Parking violations are all done automatically, and the bill is automatically sent to your residence and so on, to whoever the owner of the car is. So yeah, it's very different here in Korea, and people, you can look at it a couple of ways. You can say, well, that's an infringement because now we're under the nanny state. This is Big Brother keeping an eye out on you, and there is something to that. But on the other side of the coin, this also keeps people, says, hey, if I do something stupid, it's going to get caught on camera, and that's not good for me, and obviously it's not good for everybody. So, there's an interesting dynamic when we look at this. And, I guess the question comes down to, what if cameras are going to be used for nefarious things and used against the people and the populace, then that's a whole nother topic. But, it's really interesting on what you end up seeing for cameras in Korea. And the good thing is, like, for example, in this apartment complex, we have underground parking. We don't have assigned parking, but you'll have people that will they'll run into other people's cars, or somebody pulls out and they cut the corner too much and they nick the car next to them and they don't leave a note. It's so easy to go to the apartment complex and say, hey, sometime last night somebody rammed into my car and left and didn't leave a note. Can we go to the CCTV cameras? And sure enough, it will show that, they'll go to the video and say, oh yeah, here it is, here's the time, and okay, well, let's follow the person and see who that is, and the cameras in the underground parking will show what elevator that person got on, and then it's easy to identify that person, and then you can go to that person and say, yeah, you caused some significant damage to my car. I have the video on, this zip drive, so we need to talk about some compensation, getting things fixed, making it right. If we need to call insurance, we can do that. And so that helps immensely in that aspect. And like I said, even with crime in Korea, cameras prevent things because people know that, hey, there's cameras everywhere, so that prevents some crime. But when crime does get committed, cameras after the fact can help establish the guiltiness of the individual and what actually happened and so on and so forth. So, yeah, a lot of different things happen in Korea, and it's different. A lot of it's good. A lot of it, the safety factor of it. I think there's some things that Korea does that the U.S. should do. Like, what's the difference, since we're talking about traffic tickets and police and so on and so forth? What about car registration? In the United States, for the most part, in my experience, you buy a car, you register it, and what do you got to do every year? You got to re-register and give more money to the government because you bought a car. Even if it's bought and paid for, you still have to pay money to use the car, which I think is wrong personally. But you have to go, you have to get the little sticker, you had to go to the DMV or get it, and then you had to put it on your car and put the sticker on and so on and so forth. Or you could, mail it, or you could, now they have kiosks of where you can go, like even in the small town of Cannon City, Colorado, we could go and there was a car registration sticker kiosk. And so you put your information, whatever, and then, however it does it electronically, and then boom, it kicks out the sticker. You take the sticker and you put it onto your license plate. And then when law enforcement drives by and they see that you don't have your sticker on, of course, that results in a ticket and a fine. How is that handled here in Korea? In Korea, there's no little stickers. There's no stickers. They were like, Korea was kind of like sitting back and seeing all this stuff in the United States. It's like, we're not going to do that. We're going to cut out the middleman. And your registration, you're going to get a bill in the mail. And if you pay your bill, your registration is good. And so you don't ever have to put a sticker on your car because your registration information is tied to that license plate, which is tagged to the car, associated with that vehicle, VIN number, the whole 9 yards. So when these traffic infractions happen, or the parking enforcement drives by with their little camera on top of their vehicle taking pictures, if your vehicle is not registered and you have not paid and you're delinquent, of course there's a fine and a penalty or whatever. But if it gets to the point, you'll get another bill in the mail. And eventually, if it goes to the extreme, eventually they'll find your car and they'll tow it because you haven't paid and you're not driving, with registration, or insurance and so on and so forth. So eventually, your car will get yanked and you'll get fined a lot of money. Very different than what we see in the United States. We see cops that are pulling people over. Hey, I see that you don't have registration. You're out of registration, and then this weird encounter happens, and people get mad and upset and whatever. I think Korea, what they ended up doing is saying, we don't want any part of that, so we're just going to scan it, and if it's out of registration, we'll send a bill to your residence. So much easier. So much easier. And there's no sticker. People aren't stealing stickers off of license plates. Yeah, it's just a way more efficient system. And they've had to be more efficient and effective because you have so many people living in such a small area of land versus the United States, which has a ton of people with a ton of land. So, they have to do things more efficiently and more effectively than what we do in the United States because they have a vested interest in it. And could you imagine trying to have cops going through and giving parking tickets to everybody that's parked wrong, or issuing tickets for everybody that has an expired registration, the man hours that is required, to have a person in a car go around and pay them to drive and look for stickers or run plates or whatever it is. Here in Korea, it's like, yeah, we're that's not needed. We're going to do something more efficient. And it's all going to be on computer. It's all going to be, boom, send it, networked in, and next thing you know, you got to, if I break the law, like if I speed in an area that I'm not supposed to be speeding for whatever reason, I will get a speeding ticket in the mail. I don't have this awkward encounter with law enforcement who pulled me over because of, whatever. I will get a speeding ticket in the mail. But a lot of that doesn't happen because of the number of cameras that are around, because the navigation systems in vehicles here in Korea will show you where these speed zones are at so that you can slow down, and it minimizes accidents in those accident-prone areas. And it works out really, really well. It is something that is really, really efficient. Excuse me. So anyway, retired in Korea is very different. Oh, okay. That was just we got an apartment announcement. They were talking about the parking and how they're cleaning certain areas of the underground parking, and it'll be inconvenienced to park somewhere else for a little bit as they clean up the areas. So anyway, but that's something else. Living in an apartment here in Korea is very different than the U.S. because we got the speaker, and it'll have announcements on elevator maintenance. It'll have announcements on, if there's a power outage or they're testing the water or there's going to be repairs in a building that's going to affect the utilities of other units and whatever. Weather advisories and warnings come over that speaker system as well, which is something you don't see in the United States. Korea is a lot more networked than what I've seen in the United States. Now, I'm sure some bigger cities have some similar things, but I've never seen them in the United States. So it's really another difference of what we see in Korea versus what we see in the United States. And the cool thing is that message will be in English, or it'll be in Korean, then it'll be in English. Because there's so many foreigners that are living in this apartment complex because it's close to a military base. So, they really go the extra length to, have those translated. Of course, it's all automated. They type the apartment manager people, they type in the message, boom, it comes over in Korean, then it comes over in English. It's not like somebody sitting at a mic, no, it's all technology at its finest. So really, really interesting. The differences of being retired here in Korea, police encounters, tickets, red light, speed enforcement zones or speed traps. But again, and I think that's the biggest thing. I think one of the bigger things that the United States should do is that if there is a speed zone or speed enforcement area, it should warn you on your navigation system. I think that it's the norm here in Korea. So you could be driving along, talking with the wife, or singing songs, or whatever it is that we do, looking out the window and just kind of looking at the scenery. And how many times have you been absent-minded and not kept your eye on the speed? Then comes the speed zone, and all of a sudden, boom, you get pinged for a ticket in the United States. Whereas in Korea, they warn you long before the speed zone comes up, so you can get your head in the game. And that I appreciate. So Yeah, that's what we got going on here. Anyway, yeah, it's interesting being here in Korea. Um, Very different, very similar, but still different. Good thing different, bad thing different. Difference, if you don't mind cameras, if you mind cameras and don't like being don't like being on camera, yeah, many overseas countries now have a ton of CCTV cameras everywhere, and Korea is no exception. There's a ton of them. So there's kind of a, can that be abused? Could it be abused? Yes. Is it used more for the benefit of society and the people as a whole? In my opinion, yes. Here in Korea, they're a good thing. Is it good for deterring crime? Yes. After my 11 plus years in law enforcement and corrections and so on and so forth, I see cameras do have a place for that. Especially when people know where the cameras are, then people won't commit those crimes in the view of the camera. So it is a deterrent. And then with cameras after the fact, those cameras can be used to, punish the guilty and evidence, and that can be a huge difference between somebody not being punished for a crime versus getting the just punishment they deserve. So yeah, it's different here in Korea versus the United States. So anyway, I'm going to ask you all, what do you think about traffic cameras, how other countries do their traffic tickets, police encounters? Have you been in other countries, and what did you notice different between the United States versus the country or the area that you went to? And it might even be so different as in different parts of the United States, some are good and some are bad. Is it the big cities in law enforcement are bad, or is it the small towns and the hick sheriff and the little big man syndrome comes into play? Is it always like that, or is it just there's a few bad apples everywhere, but the majority are decent people? Put that into the comment section down below. So yeah, crime is a thing. Cameras are a thing. Following the law is a thing. And it is different here in Korea versus the United States. And it's good. I think it's a good thing for us anyway, in my opinion. So with that said, I got some other stuff to do. Got to go to the gym, hit that up, and put some comments in the comment section. And we'll see what goes on. All right, we'll see you on the next video. Peace. Cameras everywhere.